Good evening. Welcome to the April 9th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. The board's meetings continue to be hybrid, which means they are both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. If you go to the town website and click on the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal, you can watch the live stream video of the meeting, and there is a link to submit written comments for the public record. You can also join the Zoom webinar through the town clerk's portal. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during the meeting, then please alert our moderator by clicking the raise hand icon or type in the chat box. Thank you. I invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have sufficient votes for the meeting minutes of last time, March 26th, so we'll put that off till next meeting. Public hearings, A019131 Lynn Crew Revocable Trust. And the applicant wishes to adjourn this to June 11th, 2025. Is there anyone in the public or on Zoom who wishes to speak on this application? There being none, is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn to June 11th,
Second.
2025.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A024065 191 Highland Terrace LLC. Do we have affidavits?
We do have affidavits of posting and mailing in compliance with the town code, so the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing.
No, I'm
Thank
gonna grab
you.
the file. We're getting any new submissions tonight?
Yes.
Okay,
Just, I'm sorry.
Before anyone speaks about anything, it has to be stamped in, so we get copies, okay? Your stamp is working. The handouts are gonna hand out this stuff.
Sounds like an old-fashioned border crossing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not necessarily. It's like,
Michael Sciano from InterScience Research Associates on behalf of the applicant 191 Highland LLC. Together with me is Cassidy Walsh from InterScience as well. Our clients, Richard and Lauren Steinberg, are here on behalf of 191 LLC as well. John Bennett, the client's counsel, is here, as well as Chris LaGuardia from LaGuardia Design, the landscape architect, and the civil engineers, John Letterman and Jack Siegler from DeLandre Andrews Engineering. 191 Highland Terrace is a vacant waterfront parcel fronting on Sagaponack Pond. whose total lot area is 152,089 square feet, and only about 140,632 of that is the main portion of the site, excluding the flagpole. Only about 76,158 square feet of the property is located seaward of the 200-foot wetland setback, which you can see on LaGuardia's plan here, which runs through the eastern about quarter of the house. So the majority of the house is greater than 200 feet away. This places the proposed house within the jurisdiction, as well as parts of the seaward porch, the swimming pool, the pool patio, an outdoor barbecue, a pool house, the pool equipment, a generator, and a fire pit. All of those are within the town's jurisdiction. All of the other structures proposed on the property, including a tennis court, the pervious driveway, and the septic system, are greater than 200 feet away. The intent of this project was to comply with the recommended setbacks under Section 325-9A for a vacant property. That includes keeping all landscaping, grading, and clearing and other ground disturbance of natural vegetation 100 feet away from wetlands, keeping all structures at least 125, and again, the septic system is greater than 150 feet because it is greater than 200 feet away. We acknowledge that there will have to be some updates to the plan in order to depict the 100-foot non-disturbance buffer that was approved as and recorded as part of the subdivision that created this property. But generally, this project complies with all of the recommended setbacks under Chapter 325. The reason why we are here before this board tonight and not applying for an administrative wetlands permit is that based on recent projects that our team both together and separately have collectively worked on through the Town Environment Division, we know that Mr. Shea is not willing to issue an administrative wetlands permit when there is fill being proposed that is not the only fill necessary in order to lift a septic system above groundwater. Since the administrative wetlands permit process was not available for this project design, we submitted this project to the Conservation Board because we feel that fill is warranted and necessary for this property. Chris LaGuardia is here to provide some background on the overall grading design, but as noted in the letter that we submitted tonight, we would like to point out that the town has approved fill in similar quantities on the properties immediately to the north and to the south of this property. So in large part, the answer to the question of why do we need fill is due to the fact that 1,565 cubic yards of material was approved on this property, and 3,539 cubic yards of material was approved on this property. So that's 167 Highland Terrace and 195 Highland Terrace.
Do you know what year?
167 Highland Terrace was approved, I believe, in 2008, and the 3,539 cubic yards was approved in 2015.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Since fill is the main concern for this project, I just wanted to provide some clarification for the volumes of fill that was included in the submission materials, which is it's in the table that I provided. On the entire property, which is everything inclusive of everything greater than 200 feet from wetlands, the total fill volume to be imported to the site is 2,973 cubic yards. In the application itself, we indicated it was 3,884 cubic yards, but that didn't include taking out what we need to excavate and like the void volumes of where the pool is, where the septic system is, and such. So we just want to make sure that that's clear what exactly we're proposing.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is that the fill of the entire property or just within the Conservation Board's jurisdiction?
The 2,973 cubic yards is the entire property. And then the next thing I was about to get to is what is only in the Conservation Board jurisdiction, which is 1,591 cubic yards. And so when compared to what was approved on both of the other properties, we are very similar to the one to the south and far less than what was approved to the north. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. And now Chris can describe some of the intent as to why the project was proposed the way that it is.
Surveys for this.
Christopher LaGuardia, landscape architect, Watermill, New York. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you, Mike, for the preamble there. So I'm going to speak about the site design and how I came up with this, and the revegetation plan as well, and then I'll take some questions, of course. But as many of you know, I've been working out here for many decades, and I've done a lot of projects on these coastal ponds. I know the challenges that we face. I did the property to the north in 2015. So these are difficult sites because mainly the coastal ponds have a unique hydrology to them. Okay, you have these watersheds, which are agricultural fields, pushing surface water through the sites. You also have a very high groundwater, so just a couple feet below the surface. So if you dig a test hole, you go through a layer of topsoil, a layer of clay, and then you hit sand, which is completely saturated. If you wait a couple hours, that water will rise right up to the surface because it's artesian. It's under pressure. It's under pressure from the pond being filled. It's under pressure from the tide, full moon. So it's nothing to mess with, groundwater, okay, really. So when we propose what we do, we start with a 2-foot datum above groundwater always. Because even seasonal fluctuations really screw up the landscape horribly. So all the trees, affect structures, drainage structures will fail because they're in water. So that 2-foot buffer is something we really push for as a starting point. So although the site looks flat, and I know that your plans look flat, it's not flat at all. There's 10 feet of pitch from the top of the site to the water. If I look at this site plan, it's flat, right? Just like this. Okay? It's also pitched like this. Okay, that's cross pitch. So what does that mean? What does that mean? When we do our analysis and early studies, we know that all the site water, certainly the agricultural fields, are draining along the north property line. And that is the historical swale on the property, right along here. And it's amplified now by the adjacent property that has a large concrete retaining wall along it. This swale, which is much lower than the opposite side, is taking all the upland water through here. And so we honor that. We don't touch it. In fact, we improve it. We make it into what you might call a bioswale or a rain garden. So this whole length here goes all the way, empties out into the buffer zone. So that's the starting point. The next step in the design process really is I'm going to site the house according to FEMA and zoning. I'm going to site the pool, tennis court, the driveway, and more importantly, through Delandro, the sanitary system, which is here. It takes up a huge area because of groundwater. Okay. The next thing I do is I put all the trees on the plan. Why? Because there's so many drainage structures required. You don't want to do the trees after, or you're going to be planting on top of dry wells. Okay, so we do the trees next. You can see there's alleys of trees. So then the leftover space that we have is where all our stormwater goes. All the dry wells are all shallow pool dry wells, so they take up a lot of space. And we need 2 feet above groundwater at a minimum. You also want like 18 inches of cover over them so you can do some planting, irrigation, or lighting or something like that. So that's the vertical stack going on here. So once we have all these things in place, drainage for the roof, the pool, the terraces, the driveway, the tennis court, all these things, we also have buried LP tanks. I mean, they need to be 2 feet above. I've seen them pop right out of the ground from groundwater. So sort of a dangerous situation. So once all these things are in place, we then add the fill. And it's the minimum amount of fill to cover these structures. Once we've done that, we then slope down to existing grade, 3-on-1, very gentle, enough to mow. And that's how we come up with our site design. So there's a process to it. There's this underlying form to what we have here. It's stormwater, it's sanitary, it's structures, it's drainage. So it's not just we're designing something that's going to look good. It does look good, but we have to accommodate a lot of things. So that's really what's driving this design, and everything meets code. So if I just move on, the revegetation plan, this is standard, you've seen these. we have a wetland line, there's some existing vegetation. But from there to the wetland setback is all active revegetation, okay, shrubs, trees, ground covers, perennials. It's above and beyond what is normally even asked. We work with Mr. Shea, he gives us feedback, we change it, and we have a good working relationship that way. We respect his thoughts, and in the end, we've had many of these successful revegetation plans. So I think that, you know, I think this project's exemplary. I think that it's what you want. It's good for the environment. Yes, there's some fill. It's not a four-letter word. It's required. It's required to situate this house properly, situate all the structures properly, and to be safe and be sustainable, withstand 50-year storms. So we can't skimp on it, all right? And I don't think we're over asking in that regard. So anyway, any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
What would happen if you didn't bring any fill in?
Well, you'd have all these drainage structures out of the ground. Groundwater's only down a couple of feet, okay? So you gotta be 2 feet above groundwater. And then you gotta cover the structures, which are maybe 2.5 feet high, right? So there's 2.5 feet, and then you have another 18 inches of fill on top of that. So you need that vertical profile, do you see? So in this, there's a section here showing the dry wells. You also have an LP tank. I don't think you want that sticking out of the ground. I mean, some people do that, but you have that condition. You have the swimming pool too. So again, that is 2 feet above groundwater. The terracing back to the house. I mean, there is a void there, but there's not much sense to not fill it. And then simply the downslopes down to existing grade. So I think it's a minimum amount of fill to make this thing work. And again, we're not filling here. Like right here, we're cutting a little bit to make the drainage work. Because again, the site tilts, right? And even along here, we're proposing a retaining wall. The tennis court is sunken on 3 sides because it's at grade. It's not really sunken. There's a wall here, and there's a wall that connects all the way up to the house here. Okay, so this again is allowing this swale to remain open that we talked about, the drainage swale. This is a huge drainage field in here, right here and here, and then we have LP tanks as well. We also have flood venting on either side of the house required by code. The water can come and go. And I think if you look closely, you can see it's just peppered with shallow profile dry wells. But those are our calculations based on the town standards. So we have to have all these things. And luckily, you know, I got my trees in there too. So they require fill as much as anything. You cannot dig a hole into the existing grade and plant a tree, it will die. And especially the trees we do, they have like a 3-foot high root ball or 5 feet around, and you know, the trees like this, pretty standard. They need to be raised up too, just like these already are here. And they're doing very well, but anybody that plants into water, you know, they don't do well. So all those things are dictating the need for fill. But it's not excessive. And if you look closely at this, you can see the lifts might be bigger in one area, and they're very minimal at the far side of the site. It's not like we're lifting the whole site. It's sort of like this, right? Like a pie-shaped fill profile. So, any other questions?
I got 2 questions. First, would you point to approximately where the 200-foot setback line is?
200-foot setback line is 300, 200, right here. And this is the
Okay.
150. And this here is the 100-foot grading setback. We're respectful of all of that, and
So our comments would be limited to the 200-foot, up to the 200-foot line
back here.
by code. I'm looking at the survey in front of me, and I'm seeing quite a large number of circles that one is proposed dry well, typical, and I imagine that, am I correct, in all those other circles that look like that are dry wells?
Yes.
So they'd be shallow dry wells, 2
Yes, 2 feet.
2 feet. And,
Plus the cover, which is 8 inches.
yeah,
And then you have collar sometimes.
and it looks like they're located between the 6 and the 8-foot contour. If I had to guess, I'd say it's roughly at the 7-foot contour. Or
Existing contour?
Or 7.5, yeah, existing contour.
There's 7. 7 is here.
And is that 7?
Where my finger is 7, right here along this edge. Unless there's another dip somewhere.
Well, on the survey I'm looking at, it goes from 6 to 8.
It might be on this, in the swale
You
area
might-
you're looking, the low point of the property. Because there is an 8 in here.
There's a 7 here, but that is in orange, which I suppose means that's the finished fill, the finished elevation.
Yeah, solid lines are finished elevations, and then the dashed lines are existing concrete.
Do you know what the elevation is of Sag Pond?
Well, it varies, obviously, when they cut it, it goes up and down, so it's gonna be 0 when they open the cut, and then it probably perches up a couple of feet when there are no heavy rains and all that sort of thing.
You have to do all these calculations to figure out where you're gonna site those dry wells.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out, if you put the dry well in the current elevation, will it be below grade or above grade? If so, how much?
Sorry. So, as a minimum, our grade right here shows a finished grade level that is at 6 feet above groundwater, okay? So we're 6 feet above groundwater for any dry well, the grade above any dry well. So any grade you take on here, you're not 6 feet above groundwater. Above grade, existing grade, it varies, I mean, the groundwater.
Yes, okay, so, and is that code, you have to keep it 6 feet above groundwater?
No, at the bottom of the dry well would be 2 feet above groundwater.
Okay,
But
all
then
right,
if you add the
okay.
dimensions here together, you have
Okay. all right,
the thing, cover,
Right.
cover over the top of it.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm sure I will later.
Okay.
Hi, my name is John Bennett, Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, and I did hand out this evening an April 9th letter which talks about some of the elements that InterScience has presented to you in terms of surrounding approvals. And this was presented by InterScience. The single-family dwelling located on the property immediately to the north, 195 Highland Terrace, obtained a administrative wetlands permit, WAP 150057, on November 4, 2015. That permit allowed 3,539 cubic yards of clean, compatible, uncontaminated fill, located approximately 112 feet from wetlands. And also, didn't, from what I've been able to determine, have the Mr. LaGuardia's built-in sensitivity to some of the existing swales there and create, in effect, a rain garden as we've done here. So that was, again, WAP 150057 on November 4, 2015, and allowed 3,439 cubic feet of fill. I guess that's about 2,000 more. We're at 1591? Yeah. And then similarly, this single-family dwelling located on the property immediately to the south of the subject property, 167 Highland Terrace, obtained administrative wetland permit 0156A, issued on January 3rd, 2016. This permit included the deposition, and grade of approximately 1,565 cubic yards of fill, which is essentially what is proposed here. And that project, again, located 1591. Significantly, there's been no amendment to Chapter 325 with respect to the specific activities proposed by the applicants since the adoption of those approvals. And I think most of you were on the board, most if not all of you were on the board during the time of those approvals. So I'm here to remind you in council of what I've said before, which is a decision of an administrative agency which neither adheres to its own prior precedents nor indicates its reasons for reaching a different result on essentially the same facts, would be arbitrary and capricious, even if there may otherwise be evidence in the record sufficient to support the determination. And I've cited these cases in the letter. That's Hamptons LLC versus East Hampton. I'll spare you the cites, they're in my letter. And then recently in a case that my office handled against the Village of Southampton, Justice Modeleski, and a decision dated July 18th, 2024, stated a particular application here, the principal precedent effect in the area has been enshrined in the New York law for decades. A decision of a board which neither adheres to its own precedent nor indicates a reason for reaching a different result on essentially the same facts is arbitrary and capricious. So that's in terms of just trying to not be held to a higher standard than the neighbor to the north or the south. Just want a fair playing field, so to speak, which is pretty basic. Eric Bregman was kind enough to let me know, which is sort of a nice thing that some lawyers do out here, but Eric being a gentleman, let me know that he would be appearing on behalf of a neighbor across the water. I don't know what the objections will be. You'll hear those from Eric. But the proposed residence on the property is being elevated to comply with FEMA flood elevation requirements. So the importation of fill, to the extent that he's concerned about a view shed, I don't know, but for his client across the water, the importation of fill bears no relation to the applicant's requirements to elevate this home. It's going to be as high as it is based upon FEMA. And I would just add, and again, I'm foreshadowing a little bit, I don't know what Eric's specific objections to. One of the things that neighbors sometimes object to when somebody's building something across the water, they have the benefit of a view to an open area for now, but it's not your job to protect that. The board's not empowered with protecting an abutting property's view shed. And a homeowner must realize that the ability of this neighbor to improve his parcel. I mean, the only way to ensure a perfect panorama is for the homeowner to purchase adjacent properties and leave them undeveloped. There's no protection in the Southampton Town Code that would give protection to a property owner solely based upon water views. And this may come as a surprise to some people, particularly it came as a surprise to some of the Zoning Board of Appeals members, but there was a case in Suffolk County, it's Sclafani versus Rogers, which was affirmed by the appellate division. I've attached a copy of it to my submission, and in that case, an owner had the ability to put something in the conforming location, went and sought a variance, and the next door neighbor said, well, you know, now with the variance, you're going to be shifting it into my view shed, and the Zoning Board of Appeals in that case granted the variance despite the fact that it was going to affect the view shed. And the neighbor sued, the complaining neighbor sued, and just want to make sure it was, hold on a quick second, forgive me, I'm just, Justice Santorelli stated that you have, unless there's something extremely specific in the code sections protecting a view shed, which there isn't here, absolutely not, other than some precatory language, what us lawyers like to call precatory language in the general findings. There's nothing absolutely specific in the law. You can't deny a determination based, you can't deny an approval based upon somebody claiming that's going to have an effect on my view shed. That's not part of the criteria, and Justice Santorelli so found, and it was affirmed by the appellate division. So with that, I don't think I have anything else to say other than to reserve my right to comment based upon what Marty would say and what Eric is going to say, and I would ask you that you consider these precedents. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. Oh, you may have taken the assignment. Took some of the town stuff. Just in conclusion, this project can and will be made to comply with the setback requirements of Chapter 325 9A. However, due to some placement of fill on the neighboring properties approved by previous town wetland permits, this property also needs fill to some extent. And not only fill for the septic system, we can keep the fill more than 100 feet away to comply with the ground disturbance and clearing setbacks. We're going to keep all of our structures 125 feet away. We also acknowledge the fact that, based on comments from Marty, that we have to provide an updated plan to show where the non-disturbance buffer that was approved as part of the covenant, the subdivision that created this is, and also we need to update the edge of clearing. Previously on this survey, the edge of clearing was prepared when in January of 2024. Since then, some of the grasses have come back, so we're in the process of getting that updated. I just want to make sure that that was clear that we're working on that. However, we need fill to mitigate stormwater and flood-related impacts to the proposed structures from the neighboring properties. So I hope that you take that under consideration.
I have a question for you. You did make a comment that you need fill because of prior fill placed on neighboring properties. Can you be more specific?
So on the property to the north, not only is there 3,500 some odd cubic yards of fill, but there's also a retaining wall, a two-tiered retaining wall directly on the property line.
Just point that out so everybody can see.
Right here.
Okay.
That in total is about 8 feet tall. So it's tiered, so it's not 8 feet directly, but it's approximately an 8-foot difference in height. Because this property was vacant at the time, I understand why someone would look at it and say, okay, they'll just have to work around the fill that's being proposed over here. It's not going to create a flood-related impact to a structure, say. But now we have to deal with that. Now we have, when flooding happens, that wall is going to potentially channel floodwaters towards other things on this property. So what we're trying to do is design around that and because of that.
Okay, I'm trying to understand just what you're saying, and I'm doing my own interpretation, so just, are you saying that the slope of the property to the north is such that runoff from rain source moves from that property to this property?
This property right here is around elevation like 14, and we're elevation like between 8 and 9 where this house is right now. So it's sloped in this direction, so it would channel water towards our site.
Just like a picture worth 1,000 words, John Bennett, if I had. That's the wall. That's the retaining wall.
That's the lower section of the retaining wall. There's a higher section behind that.
Oh, this is the lower section. What I'm showing the board on my client's, a photograph taken, which I'll attest is taken on my client's iPhone, is the lower section of the retaining wall. There's a higher section. So you can see there's a solid retaining wall. Client's indicating along the northerly line. It's pretty significant. Marty?
So I would presume that the retaining wall would, by nature of its design, would hold everything back from coming on to your client's property in the area of the retaining wall. So tell me about the area east of the retaining wall between there and the wetland line. Is that where water comes from the neighboring property?
It also weeps through some of these concrete walls. I'll show that to the board so I can talk about it. So the integrity of those walls is in question as well.
There are, it looks like that there are weep holes in the wall that would allow. So it's not a waterproof retaining wall in the way that a septic system has a waterproof retaining wall. So it was designed to allow water to flow through it, but also, which I'm trying to just find the plan. In the package of information that I submitted tonight, there's the approved survey for, it's actually the final survey that was approved, but it, actually, no, this is the proposed. So it shows where the contours are, and especially on the western side, as well as the eastern side of that wall, there's a pretty steep slope here and here. So water that falls here that doesn't make it into dry wells is channeled in this direction and in this direction.
And you feel that the fill will prevent that?
I feel that the fill will help us to channel the stormwater towards the bioswale that exists naturally, but is also that Mr. Guardia has supplemented. And we are attempting to take the stormwater and not direct it to the house or any of the structures that we're building. So we're.
What about the houses to the south of you?
The house to the south was built to FEMA. It was also built on fill. That survey is also in the packet that I had provided. That house is on a kind of down here, but that house is on a plinth, on kind of a hillock that they made of fill. That is also up at about. This survey was done before FEMA changed the datum, so this says 14, but it's actually around elevation 13. So it's approximately where we're putting our house in terms of the elevation of grade around our house. We're putting the grade around our house is 13, theirs is 13, this one is around 14. So, but it's designed in such a, they did a much kind of kinder job in terms of it's not fill immediately adjacent to the property line, but it's still, the fact of the matter is that they were also approved for an amount of fill to elevate around the house, to elevate their pool, to elevate their dry wells. So in terms of the statement that I made of which properties may be causing, that we're reacting to, it's more the property to the north. But then to connect to what John said, 2 properties to the north and south were approved for fill, and we're just asking for the same amount of fill.
So you're saying water from the north comes onto your client's property, but not so much from the south?
Not so much from the south, I would say.
Thank you.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I should start by saying that I have not had an opportunity to review the information that the applicant just shared with you. That was not submitted to my office prior. So it puts me in an awkward position to speak about the circumstances of the other properties that are being referenced by those reports. That being said, as the board is aware, there is a preliminary advisory report on file dated February 11th, 2025, which provides a characterization of site conditions, what's intended in terms of residential development, as alluded to by the applicant. It indicates where some adjustments are needed to the survey and the vegetation proposal, including an overlay of the easement or covenant, the buffer that was required as part of the subdivision map, so we can see whether or not that has any effect on the project plans. As indicated in the report, I had also noticed that over the years, we're getting a lot of great natural recovery of diverse coastal meadow vegetation within a large portion of the proposed 100-foot non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer. So I have also asked that the revegetation plan be revised and updated to reflect those changes in conditions. What's happening with Sag Pond is that we're recognizing today that we have to give greater consideration to the current trends in changing environmental conditions when we consider these large development projects along the shoreline. And those changing conditions include rise in sea level, and predictions now are showing that the pace of that global sea level rise is likely to be faster than we thought in years past. The other change in environmental conditions that weighs heavily on my office is the information that is coming to our attention in terms of the water quality issues in Sag Pond. Sag Pond, unbeknownst to us in years past, is plagued by some pretty significant water quality problems due to an overabundance of nitrogen and other toxins. The sources of that excess nitrogen and contamination are both the legacy of nitrogen in the groundwater from many years of farming, but also the current residential development patterns in terms of large fertilize dependent lawns and landscapes. In light of that information that is coming to our attention, my office is now beginning to show a lot greater caution than perhaps we showed in years past when it comes to permitting fill within the floodplains of Sag Pond. I don't know if it's jumps out at you on the plans and surveys that were submitted, but I'll just quickly hand up an overlay of the FEMA flood zone and how it affects this property. And you can see that the majority of the property is AE elevation 11 with a small part in AE elevation And the second piece of information shows the separation between the 5-foot contour, which is close to the shoreline, and the 10-foot contour, which is beyond the westerly boundary of the flag part of this flagpole line. So the coverage in terms of FEMA mapped flood zones can be variable with regards to different properties. There also appear to have been some changes in FEMA mapping in this area, and that is some of the information that you would need to consider in not only planning for residential development of a large property like this, but particularly when you're trying to undertake a comparative analysis of this property and other properties. So as far as prior authorizations for fill placement, the setbacks don't give you the entire picture. You really need to look at the topography and flood zones to see how the circumstances of property differ. So noting the trends in changing environmental conditions related to the Sag Pond area that we're needing to consider, my report does raise significant concerns about the proposed fill amounts. Placement of significant quantities of fill in a flood zone can always pose an issue, as what it can result in is displacement of floodwaters to other areas. What does that mean? That means that the water has to go somewhere when the levels of Sag Pond are high. So if this, the elevations of this property are raised significantly, and it looks like the fill in some areas would amount to 5 to 6 feet of fill, maybe between, with the revised estimate of fill amounts, are probably talking about 150 to 200 standard full-size dump trucks. So we are talking about a large quantity of fill. So when you bring a large quantity of fill in a floodplain that is so essential in terms of water storage and retention, what you're doing is you're displacing that flood water to other areas of the Sag Pond floodplain that are then lower than the subject property if this fill is placed. So the question of how, what the level of those impacts are is somewhat unclear and imprecise, but you know that when you bring large quantities of fill to a flood zone, that it's going to change the flooding, drainage, and flood storage parameters in the area, and other properties could be adversely impacted. So with that in mind, and particularly because this is a coastal pond that is at the mercy of significant Atlantic storms, and particularly sensitive to
rise in global sea level, there's some greater concern with a property like this than there might be in other areas. The second part of that is that when you place fill, even if you're installing drainage, what you're doing is significantly increasing the amount of sheet runoff and stormwater runoff. Of course, contained in that runoff is nitrogen from fertilizer applications, which together with septic effluent is a concern, but you also have many other contaminants, chemicals that are used in property management and landscaping. Typically, when we have a site like this that has shallow groundwater conditions, I would recommend that the landowner go with alternate drainage systems. A site like this lends itself a lot more favorably to subsurface drainage chambers. Coltech is one of the companies that produces those chambers. So not only because you have a shallow depth of groundwater, but because you have this significant fluctuation in water levels associated with Sag Pond. At a site like this, you want to go with subsurface drainage chambers rather than conventional dry wells. The conventional dry wells, in order to function properly in an area like this, require a lot more fill, and because of the size of those structures, they need to be significantly elevated, they need to be covered. So at the very least, I would ask the applicant to give some consideration to alternate subsurface drainage technologies such as drainage chambers, which would lend themselves a lot better to as far as functioning properly on this site, and would also likely significantly reduce the amount of fill that needs to be placed in order to allow the drainage structures to be seeded and to function properly. Of course, landowners can have concern on a site like this about those periods of high water and storm flooding, and is going to want to be above that level of flooding. Well, placement of fill is only one of the options that you would look at in terms of getting structures above the anticipated flood levels. Structural elevation is typically what is used when you're in FEMA flood zones, because this is in an AE zone. What that means is that at the very least you would go with a concrete foundation with hydrostatic flood vents. Whenever you have a lot of fill placed seaward of the main residence, and the main residence is going to be built in a flood zone, there's always concern about whether or not that fill is going to interfere so much in the natural flooding and drainage patterns, so that it's going to trap water under the residence, or whether or not it's going to redirect that flood water in a manner that could cause harm. The reason FEMA looks for residences to be built in flood zones on concrete foundations with hydrostatic flood vents is, of course, those flood vents are designed to open up when you get extreme flood waters coming in. It allows the water to go under the main structures. And then when the flood levels go down, it allows the water to naturally recede. So you want to make sure, particularly if you're going to bring fill to a site, that you're not interfering with that natural process. Otherwise, there's always a potential of structural damage and damage to property that can result. The difficulty with the water quality issues at Sag Pond is there's no easy solution. But at the very least, new landowners and both together with existing property owners, they need to look to design the homes or design expanded homes in a manner that shows a better environmental stewardship, not only in terms of protecting these natural flood zones, but with regards to doing everything possible to minimize additional nitrogen and chemical-laden runoff going into the pond. Ideally today I look for fill to be in flood zones, to be reserved to the septic system area, to what the Suffolk County Department of Health Services requires in order to permit a system. With regards to the remainder of the development, I try and work with landowners today to minimize grade changes, to minimize artificial fill amounts. And again, particularly in areas like this, where that floodplain is so important in terms of absorbing the impacts from storms and rising groundwater levels. I also, Bridgehampton is a spectacular area, as you all know. And one of the things about that makes Bridgehampton magical is the natural terrain. What you have on this property is you have a nearly level coastal meadow that then gradually begins to ascend. And it's not really until you get north of this property that you get a sharper rise in the elevation. So I think protection of wetland ecosystems also needs to be about respecting the natural terrain and designing homes that architecturally work well with that natural terrain as much as possible, so that we're not dramatically modifying this wetland ecosystem and the scenic beauty of the natural of the fields and low-lying terrain that you have in the Sag Pond area. So I would be the first to say that in years past, I was not necessarily overly concerned about fill amounts, but over the years you learn a lot. And you learn that you need to show a lot more caution as far as permitting fill, particularly now that we have the predictions in terms of a fast rise in sea level, and especially also because of all of the data that is coming to our attention in terms of water quality degradation in Sag Pond. As you know, there's been a groundswell of local stakeholders who include many property owners who are working with the Peconic Land Trust and others to try and do everything possible to better protect Sag Pond. So I would ask that the landowner give consideration to joining with them in their efforts to be better environmental stewards of the Sag Pond ecosystem. And part of that process would be to look at the current development design and see if there are some modifications that could be entertained that might lessen the impacts on the natural floodplain and impacts in terms of surface water quality. Thank you.
Marty, question?
Yes.
A lot of stuff going on in this property. It's a big property. From what I've heard you say, the one thing that you're recommending a change in is the amount of fill. Is there anything else?
As indicated, I would recommend that they consider going with an alternate drainage technology, subsurface drainage chambers, which would not require the amount of fill that's needed for conventional dry wells. Otherwise, as confirmed by my advisory report, I am not asking that they modify either the size of the residence or the extent of improvements that are proposed. I'm just asking that they look at design options in terms of lessening the quantity of fill, and that could include structural elevation of the swimming pool, structural elevation of the patio. And, you know, as you get further back on this property, we're outside of the 200-foot wetland permitting jurisdiction, so I would not ask that they make any changes beyond the area that we regulate under Chapter 325. So I have, it's not entirely clear, but this project, because of the large size of the property, may not need zoning variances. So if that's the case, you know, they're entitled to build a large residence with accessory improvements. So at this time, I'm not asking that the coverage of the residence or general plan be changed. I'm just looking for the landowner to look at options in terms of reducing the quantity of fill and grade changes, since we're in a floodplain and because of the significant issues that we're facing with water quality degradation in Sag Pond.
And the last question is, you heard the testimony from the previous speakers, and they seem to have an issue with the concrete wall and the sloping from the neighboring property to the north. Do you see any kind of crisis there that needs to be mitigated?
Well, I think I would support the applicant's plan for creating a biofilter swale along that northerly corridor of the property. Because over the years, you know, I've always observed that area to be a poor drainage area. You know, whether or not the source of that flooding is due to the wall and certain elevations on the abutting property to the north, or whether or not it's due to variability in the soils or elevation. It's somewhat unclear. But that area has always been a poorly drained area. And because the landowner has rightly integrated a bioswale through that area, not seeing that the residents and improvements to the abutting property to the north would definitely have significant impacts on this property in terms of runoff and flooding. But, having just received the applicant's reports tonight, I would have to go and look at the topography of that property in order to speak more about that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
John, do you have anything more to say at this time? It doesn't mean we're ending.
I know, I do, but I'd like to hear what Eric has to say.
That's where I was going to go next. I usually wait to the end, Eric. Right now, what we're identifying is that our staff is suggesting these two areas, you just heard them, the amount of fill and the type of the drainage, the engineering of the structure for the drainage. So Eric, that's what we're going to have some more discussion on, but I would like to hear if you have something else that perhaps is a concern that we missed. And you need to do the formal thing of signing in.
My name is Eric Bregman. I'm a lawyer in East Hampton, and I've had the pleasure of working with John, nice words, and with this board in the past.
Have those been stamped in, Eric? Have they been stamped in?
Yes, they have.
Okay, great, thank you.
I can pass them down. Yep.
John has one already. Get one from Marty, but here it is. I forgot about you, Marty. That's a shame on me. If you look at the first page, I would like to speak to the fill and drainage and the issues that are of the concern to the board. I represent the Elstons, which if you look at what I just handed out, on the property right across the way, there are 4 properties here you see across the pond. They are the second one down from 75050 My client's concerns are exactly what Marty spoke of. I didn't hear his speech or beforehand, but it is exactly what I would have said with more elegance, perhaps. The 2 issues are the flooding, because my client's property and all those properties on the other side of the pond are the ones that might very well be affected by changes in flooding caused by the fill or the raising of this property. And it is raising the entire developed property. It's really making a plateau. It's not just a small fill. It goes, as you see from the survey, see, the fill goes all the way back to here. It's raising the entire area, and it goes from at the low point of about 8 here up to 12, which is kind of remarkable since they only need an elevation of 10 over the septic system, which is all the way in the north, in the back. So it's not clear why they need 7 feet of fill to get up to 12 from 5 feet of fill, sorry. And I don't need to expand on what Marty said about the concerns about runoff and the concerns about displacement of the waters during storms, etc. That's why we're here, or I'm here, for my clients. It's also on the first page of what I handed out, where the property is. You see the outline in orange, and then there is a line across right here. That is my best estimate of where the 125-foot setback would be. So the development would be north of that. You can see all the properties on the other side have no fill. I only know 2. I know the Elsteins and the one furthest south, which was actually not quite completed. They don't have their CO yet, but they recently built. They all have 300-foot and more setbacks. It's 300 feet to the swimming pool on the Pop property, which is the one further south, and it's 300 feet to the swimming pool on the Elstein property, and the houses are further back than that. Now, they don't have to go back 300 feet, but there's room to do that, and there's room to do that with the area that they have and within zoning. So they can get to a slightly higher level just by moving north. It's one thought.
North or west?
I guess west, thank you. And I don't know where the concept of only 2 feet of, that the groundwater is within a couple of feet of the surface. The only information, hard information I have is from the survey, and it says groundwater is at 4.3 feet. At 10 feet, that would give them 6 feet or almost 6 feet, where the septic system is. And at 10 feet, where they have the dry wells, that would also give them 5.7 feet. So there seems to be overkill. It's a whole plateau of fill, raising the whole property, and not raising the house per FEMA, but raising everything around it. And making this, as I say, a new plateau. And it doesn't seem to need it. They can do what they wanted to do, I think, with a better design in terms of the fill, and they can deal with the trees and all the things that Chris was rightly concerned about by design and not by just a lot of fill. My guys, just very quickly, my guys will be affected by the change in the flood patterns and by the potential adverse effects on the water quality. And all the people across the pond lived with that and provided for it. So I would just support what Marty said, that this can be done in a much more environmentally caring or effective way.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the surveyors? I have a couple of questions about the survey. I don't know if anybody, if you guys are fluid on that to answer or not. Let me tell you what I'm looking at. and it's a little bit confusing to me.
Are you looking at the 8-foot elevation that's on the property to the north?
No,
Okay, we're going to correct that. That was a leftover from, I'm just pointing that out on our survey because I noticed that as we were putting this presentation together, and Saskis is correcting that. So if
I'm
you,
looking at a dotted line, and the arrow to it says shoreline, located 8/7/2012. Now, in my understanding of physics, that dotted line should be very level. It seeks its own level. But yet, crossing that line is a 6-foot contour and an 8-foot contour. I might have skipped a class in physics, but I don't really understand how that can happen.
I will speak with Mr. Saskis and find out where these contours came from, and if he had prepared the topography at the same time that he prepared the shoreline. I'm not sure. We'll check. So,
Thank you.
Mhm.
John?
One second. That's just something quick, just to put things in perspective. So, what does 1,000 yards of fill look like? Okay. What does 500 yards of fill look like? If you took this room and you raised 4 feet of dirt, it's 400 yards of fill. Okay? If I went to 8 feet, I'd be at 800 yards of fill. That's what we're talking about here. We put it in perspective. We're not talking about huge land masses and massive amounts of grade change. Okay? That's how much that fill is. And so if we're proposing, I don't know what the number is, 1,300, I know we could lower it, but in perspective, it doesn't fill this room. Okay? So I just want to point that out. That's all. It's not a big environmental impact. It's necessary to create a site design that is functional, safe, and aesthetically pleasing and horticulturally effective for growing plants, which is what I do. Okay, so that's my comment.
Sorry. Just a couple of things. Marty, I want to make sure that you don't think I was trying to sandbag you. On October 31st, 2024, which is about 5.5 months ago, by letter of that date, I sent you these two, the 191 Highland Terrace and the 195. I'm sorry, I sent you the 195 Highland Terrace and the 167 Highland Terrace, reference to those permits and talked about how much fill had been brought into those, and that's essentially what I gave you tonight. So I don't want the board to think that I was trying to catch you by surprise or anything. 5 months ago, I sent you those reference those two wetlands permits to the north and to the south, and even had the amount of fill on those two permits. The other thing I did want to point out was in terms of only because I've been involved in a lot of FEMA litigation. The pool in the FEMA doesn't require structural elevation of a pool. FEMA requires, if you look at the FEMA bulletins, and I've read them carefully on pools because it's an issue, FEMA says you either have to elevate it, or you can put it at grade or around imported fill, as long as the fill is not structural. And this is not structural fill. The thought is, of course, what happens during a flood event. That's why you elevate structures, but you don't have to elevate a pool if it's at grade or surrounded by non-structural fills, because during a flood event, the water just washes over the fill. And again, we're not in a V zone, we're in an A zone. So I think that was important to correct in the record. There's no FEMA issue here. And then again, I just what I have been conversing with the clients and during the presentation, we just wanted to hear everything that was said. Does the board have any other questions?
Do you know what the elevation is at the top of the pool?
The elevation at the top of the pool? No, I don't.
So there's actually a cross section through the pool. And our pool is, is built into the grade. There's no, you can't elevate it, you'd be cutting fill out, you see. So we're 2 feet above groundwater, and then we have a 4-foot deep pool. That's really minimum depth for swimming. So there's no need to structurally elevate it when we're already being built into the grade. You all understand that?
I was just wondering on the FEMA issue, there's no elevation.
Right.
So
So
we're not
the-
up in the air and filling under it.
So the top of the pool will be significantly below the first floor elevation of the house.
It's a couple feet down, yes. The first floor is at 13.5, and right now the pool is at 12. So 4-foot deep pool, plus the foot structure would put us at, that's 5, so that would be elevation 7, minus 2 feet would put us down to
Okay. All right, that's what I was
5, right?
trying
Elevation
to,
5, groundwater's at 4 point something.
So,
So we're right on the number with that, huh?
if I may, our position quite clearly is that the board, as recognized in its prior decision, doesn't have specific authority to regulate this stuff. But having said all of that, Phil, but having said all of that, I've been talking to my clients and I've been talking to the design team. And we'd like to come back to you with a alternative that would probably remove some of this fill, but we'd like to do it in a fairly rapid order. We're trying to cooperate, and if we could do that. Our clients have charged the design team to do this rapidly. We have construction windows that we're trying to meet, and
you can go back in 2 weeks if you want.
that would be fantastic.
Okay. I would like to throw out a couple of ideas. I want to throw out a couple of ideas.
Sure.
And probably you're the guy. You, yeah, no, you, yeah. Eric has said, what Marty has said, what his report says, and what you've heard. What I'm seeing is a very large number of drainage pools. I'm not sure I've ever seen a property with this many pools. You gotta follow the code. You know what that is more than I do. So you gotta make that happen. But I wanna take reference to the location of some of those pools. I'm looking at the pools that are directly east of the proposed swimming pool. I don't understand why they need to be there and why they couldn't be closer to the south property line, approaching where the garage is, where you have some very densely populated pools in some places of the property, but not over there. And you might find other places such as that, to move them away from there. There is something that would be probably much a bigger project. I'm not asking you to do it, but if it works for you, if you could consider moving the whole project westward, I don't know how much, and I'm just throwing that out there. Not a requirement. You've done very well.
Find a home for that.
You've done very well in meeting the recommended setbacks of chapter 325. Some applicants don't do that. You've come in at the get-go with that. We can't fault that. You've met that standard. But if you did move the project back a little bit, it might help to not have to add quite so much fill to achieve what your goals are. I'm just gonna say that, and no pressure to do that. You gotta wanna do that because it's your property. And I'm looking at the line that is the 150-foot setback line. And I'm wondering if you can play around with all these drainage structures and the fill and your elevations to use that line as perhaps the line where you leave the natural grade. You gotta figure that out with the pool and all that. That would remove a great deal of the fill. And John, to answer your question, which Marty already did, as time goes on, we learn things. So if there's a very compelling need to have fill on a property, we have to consider that. I don't think that meets this I don't think this property meets that test. And I think there's some things that you can do. You've already said there's some things you can do. I would expect that if you do those things, I would ask that you get the plans into Marty as soon as you can prior to the meeting, so he can review them. I would expect it could be a very quick meeting next time. Is there anyone on Zoom that wants to speak on this application?
No one has their hand up.
Is there a motion to adjourn this for 2 weeks?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Give me a second to gather the drawings. Okay. Okay. You didn't hold it. You're fired.
Okay.
The administrative wetland permits are in your packets. Advisory report for planning board, Town of Southampton, Couple Boathouse site plan.
Good evening again, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a pending site plan application for the historic Tupper Boathouse, which is on town property at 1976 North Sea Road in North Sea. It fronts on the North Sea Channel and North Sea Harbor. There are several recommended comments. The first is that based upon an Environment Division site assessment completed on March 28, 2025, no wetland permit is needed for the planned patio construction as it is located at least 50 feet landward surface waters along 100 feet or more of functional bulkhead. Second, consideration should be given to creating a native plant demonstration garden as is featured at other historic sites in order to educate visitors and the public about the value of native plants, the pollinators, butterflies, songbirds, and other wildlife. Thirdly, interpretive signage could also be added along the public walks. Four, establishment of a waterside buffer strip is likewise recommended so as to increase public awareness regarding the critical role that native plants play in sequestering carbon and filtering out landborne contaminants, thereby keeping our local air and harbors clean. And lastly, in light of the prominence of the Tupper Boathouse, there would likely be considerable public interest in and support for creating the native garden as an Eagle Scout project.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? ML Bridge LLC.
This is a pending site plan application for a residentially developed lot on Dune Road in Bridgehampton that has frontage on Mecox Bay. The lot is part of a subdivision. Subdivision was conditioned upon the landowners obtaining site plan approval when they seek to complete any improvements at the site. So, as noted by the advisory comments, this property has some history before this board. The first note indicates that with the exception of a minor change to the DEC coverage calculations, namely a reduction in the planned area of the proposed residential second-story addition from the Conservation Board approved footprint of 464 square feet now to 454 square feet. The survey is prepared by David L. Saskis with a latest revision date of April 30, 2024, which was filed with the pending site plan application. Appears to be otherwise consistent with the survey that was approved by this board pursuant to wetland permit CB 24029, which was issued on April 15, 2024. Second, as depicted on the applicant's surveys, installation of an IAOWTS is proposed, thereby mitigating the wetland impacts of the proposed expansion and living area. Thirdly, as further required by the Conservation Board, land to be affected by the sanitary system upgrade will be subsequently revegetated with town-approved native plants. There's reclamation together with the continued protection of the covenanted wetland preservation area, naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer, and scenic easement will offer additional remediation. Fourth, based upon a March 20, 2025 Environment Division field assessment, the white paint on the roof deck railings is tattered and peeling with the paint runoff washing into the wetlands. As such, the paint residue needs to be cleaned up, followed by repainting of the rails. 5, there is a kayak and apparent winter stored dock in the buffer and wetlands, which is in direct contravention with special condition number 10 of the referenced wetland permit. In that condition states the storage or overwintering of docks, rams, floats, boats, and or other watercraft within the required scenic easement, wetland preservation area, and or wetland buffer is strictly prohibited. Consequently, the kayak, floating dock, and mooring anchors need to be removed. And lastly, there is a rolled up fence in the buffer, which likewise needs to be taken out. Additionally, phragmites has been cut alongside the catwalk at a width of greater than 4 feet, which runs counter to the terms and conditions of the covenant establishing the wetland preservation area and naturally vegetated buffer, which was recorded on January 25, 2013 under LIBOR D00012718, page 545, as that covenant language prohibits clearing of vegetation within the wetlands and required buffer, with the exception of allowance for a 4 feet wide path.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? West Hampton Beach Yacht Squadron site plan.
This is an application for proposed improvements at the West Hampton Beach Yacht Club, which is located on Yacht Club Drive in the hamlet of Remsenburg, Spion. There are several comments. The first is that the Conservation Board supports the planned installation of an IA or WTS, as a septic system upgrade will enhance surface water quality within the adjacent Doug tidal canals in Mauritius Bay. Second, the board also supports the planned grass paver parking, as it will allow for better rainwater infiltration and less stormwater runoff. And thirdly, as proposed site improvements located within 200 feet of naturally vegetated shoreline, a planning board wetland permit is required.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Bridgehampton Road Races.
There's a lot in the Bridgehampton Road Races subdivision. When it was created, The subdivision approval was conditioned upon the landowner getting site plan approval for this lot. Rather than go that route, they sort of received a building permit without knowledge of the need to get site plan approval. They cleared the property and made significant modifications to the grades. And one of the goals of requiring site plan approval was to ensure that the environmental sensitivity of this property was well protected when the residence was designed. So there are two comments. The first indicates that the Conservation Board has reviewed the Bridge Lot 16 site plan and the Bridge Lot 16 revegetation plan drawing sheets L-1 and L-2 respectively as prepared by Harris Design Landscape Architecture dated September 3rd, 2024, last revised January 21st, 2025 for the above referenced property, and has deemed the plans to be consistent with the December 19, 2024 recommendation of the Chief Environmental Analyst, which called for native revegetation at a 2-to-1 ratio of planting to the square footage that was overcleared and grade impacted in order to offset the impacts of the unauthorized grade modifications and over clearing. And second, the proposed resultant tighter clearance and site disturbance standard amounting to 30.26% of the lot area as a consequence of protection of existing natural vegetation, the proposed native reforestation, as compared to the allowable 35% of lot area as per section 330-67, needs to be perpetuated and made enforceable by an obligatory legally binding agreement such as a covenant or conservation easement, which would hereon run with the land.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution of conditional approval, A 023012, Piotra Ostrega, and others. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Pietro Ostrega, trustee of the Pietro Ostrega Living Trust, and Samantha Angelo, trustee of the Samantha Angelo Living Trust, for the proposed project on the terms and conditions of forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02403078, Harbor Watch Court LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to 78 Harbor Watch LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions of forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review secret determination, A 024022, Adam Spinner.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property at 13 Bishop Avenue in the hamlet of West Hampton. The application has been made in order to construct a residential second-story deck with untreated wood as an extension in addition to an existing rear partial roof over a second-floor deck above an existing previously authorized wetland permitted rear triangular first-floor deck. The applicant is also seeking to reconstruct the existing first-floor deck as well as extend it to match the footprint of the new second-floor deck above. Southerly stairs with railings are planned within the footprint of the first-floor deck to access the second-floor deck. New steps to grade are also proposed to access the first-floor deck, and then a foundation is needed in order to support the decks. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated April 7, 2025. The report indicates that property is presently encumbered by a wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer landward of wetlands that was established as a condition of a prior conservation board permit many years ago. The width of that buffer was about 25 feet. The corridor of natural vegetation is only 20 feet, so the buffer is not wholly compliant. Also, the buffer, a large portion of the buffer is transitioning to wetlands. So in order to offset the impacts to the advancing wetlands, to bring the current buffer into compliance, as well as to provide mitigation for the expanded deck footprint. I'm recommending that the buffer be increased from 25 feet landward of the bulkhead to 35 feet landward of the bulkhead. There will be a need for native planting to bring that buffer into compliance, and of course it will be covenanted. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A024046, 24 Holly Lane LLC.
This application relates to a developed property in a watermill that is located but has very extensive flooded freshwater wetlands, landward of the bulkhead. It has a small home right now. The applicant is seeking this board's approval to demolish and remove that home and construct a new larger home with an elevated pool and deck. The construction plans that are before you are the product of extensive communications and feedback between my office and the applicant. The applicant is looking to mitigate the impacts of the project by preserving intact all existing wetlands, by maximizing covenanted naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffers, thereby bringing the buffers right up to the elevated structures. I've also asked that the remaining disturbed ground be landscaped with town-approved native vegetation, and that the existing fence lines within the wetlands and buffering areas be removed and reconfigured landward of the encumbered areas. Not sure I mentioned it. There's an advisory report dated April 4, 2025 on record. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination as such, recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A024070, Joseph Sarami.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property on Inlet Road West in the hamlet of Shinnecock Hills. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 26, 2025. The application has been filed in order to construct a small addition to the existing residence and also to legalize the screen porch, the existing deck, and to extend the deck a bit for the purposes of installing a plunge pool. All those activities would occur in high elevated ground, consistent with the wetland permit application that was previously filed by the former landowner. I'm asking that all land areas seaward of the existing residence and the planned improvements be covenanted as naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffers and wetland preservation areas. The applicant has agreed to those mitigated measures and has already ordered the updated survey, and is hoping to get that to you before a decision is made on the application. They've also already started working on the buffer revegetation plan. So the applicant is amenable to all of the recommended mitigation, which would offset the wetland impacts and make this the project compatible with the standards for wetland permit issuance. As such, we have sufficient information to make a determination, and I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-E of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution to issue modified conditional approval, A 021094, 51 MPL LLC.
This is a property that contains town and state regulated freshwater wetlands, which are integral to Mill Pond and Watermill. The landowners have received, there is a small home on the property. Landowners had received a conditional approval to construct a second floor on that home, to build a swimming pool roadside of the residence, to upgrade the sanitary system by installing an IA or WTS, and to install permeable walks and a small permeable patio area. The applicant did file the required revised survey, which was approved, but now the landowners would prefer to replace the existing home with a modular home of the exact same size, which would be installed in the same footprint. It would be a two-story modular, consistent with the living area that was previously approved by this board. There have been no other changes to the project plans, and consistent with the original conditional approval, the applicants are yet amenable to covenanting the on-site wetlands as a wetland preservation area, maximizing restored naturally vegetated wetland buffers, and also landscaping all of the remaining disturbed ground on the property with native vegetation. That being said, we do have sufficient information to make a determination. So this is a resolution to approve the project modifications so that the applicant can get the needed revegetation plan and draft covenant to us so that we can issue the requested wetland permit.
Motion to issue the modification?
Second.
Resolved that a modified conditional approval be issued to 51 MPL LLC, subject to proposed project terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well,